morning I came home from hospital, my husband was at brunch. Not at the hospital. Not in the parking garage pulling the car around. Not even answering his phone when the discharge nurse handed me the paperwork and asked if someone was coming to pick me up. He was at brunch. With his college friends. At that place in Midtown he loves, the one with the bottomless mimosas and the eggs Benedict he always says are worth the wait. I know because he posted a photo. Smiling. Fork in hand. Sunlight hitting the table just right. I had just had emergency gallbladder surgery. I want you to sit with that for a second, because when I first tell people that, they always say something like, wait, he didn't know? And that's the part that's hardest to explain. He knew. He had dropped me off at the ER himself, 2 nights before. He had sat with me in the waiting room for about 40 minutes, and then he said he needed to go home and sleep because he had an early call the next morning. He kissed my forehead. He said he'd be back first thing. He was not back first thing. He texted me that morning, the morning after my surgery, and said the guys had driven up from Philadelphia and it would be weird if he bailed. He said I was in good hands. He said the doctors were taking care of me. He said, and I am quoting this exactly because I screenshotted it and I have read it probably 200 times since, "You're a tough girl. You've got this." I was 31 years old, lying in a hospital bed with a drain still in my side, and my husband told me I was a tough girl and I'd got this. The nurse who discharged me, her name was Donna, and I will never forget her. She looked at the front entrance, and then she looked at me, and she said, very gently, "Is there someone we can call?" And I said no, I'd get a lift, it was fine. And she said, "Honey, he just had surgery. You cannot take a lift home alone." And then she looked at me again, that kind of look that sees straight through the thing you're performing, and she said, "Is there anyone?" I called my dad. That phone call is the thing I keep coming back to, because I've called my dad for a lot of things in my life. Flat tires, bad grades, the time in college I thought I was failing organic chemistry. I have called him crying, I have called him panicking, I have called him at 2 in the morning from a parking lot in New Jersey once, and that's a whole other story. But I had never, not once in my life, called my dad and had to say the words I said that afternoon. "Dad, I need you to come get me. I had surgery and my husband isn't here." There was a pause. It was maybe 4 seconds long, and then he said, "I'm already in the car." He drove 90 minutes to get me. He didn't ask a single question. He just showed up in the discharge bay in his old grey fleece, and when he saw me in the wheelchair, he looked at me with this expression I can't fully describe, somewhere between heartbreak and something quieter and more dangerous, and he hugged me for a long time. And then he put my bag in the back seat, and he helped me into the car and he drove me home. On the way home, I told him everything, not just about the surgery. Everything. My husband. I'll call him my husband throughout this, because honestly, that's how I still thought of him then, still thought of him as mine, still thought of the whole mess of our marriage as something fixable. My husband and I had been together for 6 years and married for 2. We met when we were both working in DC. He was charming in the specific way that men are charming when they want something from you. Not pushy, not obvious, just present, in a way that felt like attention, like someone finally noticing you were in the room. We moved to New York after we got engaged. Into my apartment initially because he was between leases, and then into a bigger place that we got together. Or that I thought we got together. Until I realized that together in practice meant that I covered the security deposit and first month's rent because he was waiting on some payments from clients. That was the first time that phrase came up. It would not be the last. My husband was, on paper, a consultant. He had a website. He had business cards. He went to a lot of lunches. What he actually made in income varied so wildly year to year that I had stopped trying to track it, which, I now understand, was by design. I have a good job. I work in healthcare compliance. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and I'm good at it. And I have been methodical about my savings since my first real paycheck at 24. My dad raised me that way. My dad, who grew up with nothing and built a construction business from basically a single truck and a lot of early mornings, always said the same thing. You own what you build. Don't net anyone else's name on what you built. I did not take his advice as seriously as I should have. By the time I was sitting in that car telling my dad everything, my husband's name was on our joint checking account, on our lease, on a credit card I had opened, thinking we would use it for joint expenses, and which he had, over the course of about 18 months, run up to just under $22,000. I hadn't looked at the statements carefully. I trusted him. I was working 60-hour weeks, and I was tired, and I trusted my husband. My dad listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make that sound fathers make. The sharp exhale, the slow head shake, until I got to the credit card number. And then he said, quietly, "Send me the statements." I said, "Dad, you don't have to." He said, "Send me the statements." We pulled up to my building. He helped me up the stairs. He made me soup, actual soup, from scratch, because my dad is the kind of person who keeps a bag of carrots and a rotisserie chicken in his car, apparently. Or maybe he stopped somewhere. I still don't know. He set me up on the couch with a blanket and a glass of water and my phone charger within reach, and then he sat down in the armchair across from me and he said, "Tell me about the account at Regions." I blinked. "How do you know about the Regions account?" he said. "Because you mentioned it once 2 years ago, when you were setting it up for direct deposit, and if his name is on your checking, I want to know if that one is separate." It was separate. Thank God it was separate. Thank God it was separate. My dad had a very good memory, and I had, without realizing it, made one smart decision. I had kept the account I'd had since college in just my name. My husband had never asked about it. I don't think he knew it existed. My dad nodded slowly when I confirmed that. He said, "Okay, that's something." My husband came home at 7:30 that evening. He looked genuinely surprised to see my dad sitting in the armchair. He said, "Oh, hey, I didn't know you were coming up." And then he looked at me on the couch and said, "How are you feeling? You look better." I had not spoken to him since the text message that morning. I did not speak to him now. My dad said, very calmly, "Sit down." My husband sat. What happened in the next 45 minutes I will not describe in full because some of it is still in legal process and my attorney has advised me to be careful about specifics. What I will tell you is this: my dad is not a man who raises his voice. He is not a man who threatens, or postures, or performs anger for an audience. What he does, what he has always done, in business and in life, is ask very specific questions and wait for the answers. And he had, in the 2 hours since I'd sent him the credit card statements, asked his accountant and his attorney to look at some things. My husband, it turned out, had done some things that went beyond being a bad spouse. The credit card, my card, in my name, that he was an authorized user on, had charges on it that were categorized as business expenses. For a business I had never heard of. An LLC registered in Delaware, with an address that turned out to be a UPS store in Hoboken. The LLC had my husband's name as registered agent. It also had mine, forged, my attorney would later confirm, as a co-owner. There's a word for signing someone's name to financial documents without their consent. It starts with F, and it is a federal crime. My dad laid this out quietly, statement by statement. My husband's face did a complicated series of things. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said he had been going to tell me. He said it was an investment vehicle, that I was supposed to be on it, that he had just handled the paperwork, because I was always so busy. My dad said, "You used her signature on a business registration without her knowledge." My husband said, technically, my dad said, "I'm going to stop you there." He had already called his attorney. He had already called my bank's fraud line. He had already, while making soup in my kitchen, put things in motion that I didn't fully understand until weeks later. That night, my husband slept in the guest room. The next morning he found that his name had been flagged on the joint account pending investigation and that the credit card had been frozen. He also found, when he tried to log into a financial app on his phone, that I had changed the passwords. Not my dad, me. My dad had suggested it, gently, and I had done it myself, alone in the bathroom at 2 a.m, shaking a little but clear in a way I hadn't felt in years. He knocked on the bedroom door at 8 a.m. and said we needed to talk. I said, through the door, "My attorney will be in touch." I did not have an attorney yet at that point. I got one that afternoon. Her name is Rebecca, and she is 54 years old, and she has a degree from Columbia Law, and she looked at everything I put in front of her, and she said, "This is actually a fairly clean case." She said it like she was complimenting the paperwork, which I suppose she was. She said the forged signature alone was significant. She said the LLC was going to be very interesting to unwind. She said the word fraud in a tone of professional calm, like a doctor naming a diagnosis. I cried in her office. Not because I was sad, exactly. Or not only. I cried because someone was finally saying out loud the thing I'd been circling around for months without being able to name it. That this was not normal. That this was not just, he's bad with money, or we have different financial styles. That what had been done to me had a name and a legal category, and there were things that could be done about it. The next few weeks were not simple. There were conversations I hadn't prepared for. The lease, for instance, his name was on it, and getting him out while I stayed was a process that involved my landlord and a notarized letter, and, at one point, my dad physically sitting in the building manager's office. Which I only know because the building manager told me afterward that he had never met someone who asked questions quite like that. My dad takes notes on a yellow legal pad. He has been doing this since before I was born. There were conversations with my mum, who had never fully trusted my husband but had kept it to herself in that particular way. Mothers do when they've decided their child needs to learn something on their own. She flew out from Phoenix the second week. She brought food and said very little, and sat next to me on the couch and held my hand and let me talk. There were conversations with my friends, some of whom were shocked, and some of whom, in the specific way of very good friends, were not shocked at all and were just relieved I was finally talking about it. And there were conversations with myself, in the quiet of the apartment after everyone had gone home, in the 4 a.m. darkness that feels different after surgery, when your body is healing and your mind is running faster than it should. I had believed in this person. I had chosen him. I had handed him access to parts of my financial life because I was tired and busy and in love, in that way where love makes you want to believe the story someone is telling about themselves. The LLC was dissolved by court order 4 months later. The charges on the credit card that could be attributed to fraudulent business use were disputed, and, after a review process that my bank was, once the fraud case was opened, genuinely helpful about, largely reversed, the credit card itself was closed and the remaining balance is part of the divorce settlement, which is still being finalized, but which Rebecca tells me is going in the right direction. My husband, my ex-husband, I am practicing saying that, lost a lot. Not everything, because the law is what it is, and Rebecca told me early on to have realistic expectations. But the LLC, and what it represented, and what he had done with my name and my credit, had consequences, real ones, the kind that follow a person. He texted me once about 3 months in. He said he was sorry. He said he had made mistakes. He said he hoped I knew it wasn't about not loving me. I read it twice. And then I put my phone down and I thought about my dad driving 90 minutes without asking a single question. I thought about Donna the nurse, who looked at me and saw clearly what I was performing. I thought about Rebecca in her office, saying this is a fairly clean case, like it was a compliment. I thought about the Regent's account, the one in just my name, the one I had kept since I was 22, the one my dad had remembered because he listens carefully to things I say even when I think no one is paying attention. I did not write back. There's a thing people say when they find out what happened, when I tell the full version of this story. They say, "How did you not see it?" And I understand the question, even though it's the wrong question. The right question is, how do you build a life with someone and keep yourself intact inside it? How do you love someone without dissolving into their version of who you are? How do you know in real time which parts of yourself you're giving freely and which parts are being taken? I don't have a clean answer to that. I am 31 years old and I am still learning it. What I have is this: a lease in my name only, a credit card in my name only, a new one, with a limit I set myself and a balance I check every Sunday morning with my coffee, a savings account, still the same one I've had since I was 22, that is healthy and growing and has one authorized user, which is me, an attorney who answers my emails within the day, a mum who lives in Phoenix but texts every morning, a dad who drives 90 minutes without asking why. The gallbladder scar is mostly faded. It's still there if you know where to look. A small, pale line below my ribs on the right side. I catch it sometimes when I'm getting dressed in the morning. It doesn't hurt anymore, but I remember exactly what it felt like in that discharge bay, in the wheelchair, when Donna asked if there was anyone. There was. There is. I just had to call. I've thought a lot about the word consequences. Not in the dramatic way people use it, like a warning, like a threat, more in the plain, factual way. Every choice lands somewhere. Every door you open or leave unlocked eventually shows you what was waiting on the other side. My husband made choices, small ones at first. Choices that were easy to explain away, easy for me to absorb without looking too closely. The late payments, he said, were timing issues. The expenses, he said, were investments. The signature, he said, was just paperwork I didn't need to worry about. Each one landed somewhere. In my credit score, in my account balance, in a Delaware LLC I didn't know I co-owned. Choices don't disappear, they accumulate, and I made choices too. That's the part I had to sit with, really sit with, alone in my apartment in those first weeks after everything came apart. I chose not to look at the statements. I chose to believe the version of events that was easier to live inside. I chose over and over the comfort of not knowing over the discomfort of finding out. That's not weakness exactly, but it's not wisdom either. And the difference between those two things cost me. What I keep coming back to is this: intelligence isn't about how much you know. It's about what you're willing to look at clearly. My dad is not the smartest person I know in the formal sense. He didn't go to college. He built his business by hand. He keeps notes on a yellow legal pad. But he has always been willing to look at things clearly, even when what he sees is hard. That's a kind of intelligence that doesn't come with a degree. It comes from practice. From making yourself be honest about what you're seeing, even when the easier thing is to look away. I had to learn that the hard way. Most useful things are learned that way. And Rebecca, my attorney, said something to me once that I wrote down and kept. She said, the people who recover fastest from this are the ones who stop trying to explain why it happened and start deciding what they're going to do next. She wasn't cold about it, she was practical. There's a version of understanding that keeps you stuck in the past, turning the same question over and over, looking for an answer that makes the whole thing make sense. And there's a version that moves, that says, I see what happened, I understand my part in it, and now I choose differently. The second version is harder. It doesn't give you the satisfaction of a clean explanation, but it's the one that actually gets you somewhere. Donna saw me clearly in that discharge bay. Rebecca saw my case clearly in her office. My dad, who drove 90 minutes without asking a single question, has been seeing me clearly my whole life. The people who helped me most weren't the ones who told me what I wanted to hear. They were the ones who showed up and told me the truth. I'm still learning to be that person for myself, to show up for my own life with that kind of honesty. It's slower work than I expected, but the Regions account is healthy. The lease has one name on it, and every Sunday morning I check my credit card balance with my coffee, and I am awake to my own life in a way I wasn't before. That's not nothing, that's actually everything.